Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I'm the Young Adult Librarian at the Rock Island Public Library, and the book I'm going to tell you about today is one of my favorite nonfiction books, and it is called The Wasp That Brainwashed the Caterpillar. So this book is available through our Hoopla ebook service as an audiobook if you want to listen to it. And you might want to, or you might not, because there's a lot of horrifying stuff in here. Basically, it's all about different creatures from the animal kingdom that maybe you don't know so much about. And many of them have very evocative names, including the anti-capitating fly. So, I'm not going to read that one. You kind of get the idea, probably. But then there are some, maybe you're more familiar with some of these, like the anglerfish. And the anglerfish is just kind of nightmarish. I find a lot of undersea creatures to be pretty scary. Like most stuff above ground or, on the surface. Like even most bugs. Like most bugs I'm fine with. Spiders, centipedes, it doesn't matter. Snakes, I think they're great. But deep, deep in the ocean, there's some scary stuff. And the anglerfish is one of those things. And I mean, frankly, it's not just because of what I'm about to tell you. It's just how they look, and they can be deeply, deeply unsettling in their appearance. But it's because deep, deep, far beneath the surface of the ocean, it's a completely different world. It's weirder than outer space, probably, in a lot of ways, because these are animals living under conditions that would kill us instantly. So we can't really imagine what life is like, and something looks scary to us. Well, that's just how it is. So with that in mind, with that kind of warning out of the way, let me just tell you that the anglerfish, first of all, this, you've seen this probably. If you've ever seen a fish that looks like this, okay, so that's a female anglerfish. Only the females look like that, and this is important because male anglerfish, I'll just read this, basically they latch onto a female. And once this happens, enzymes begin to break down his face, welding him to the female. He'll grow considerably larger by tapping into the female's circulatory system, which will provide him with nutrition, while unnecessary organs and structures like eyes atrophy away. Because he's stealing nutrition from her, he's technically a parasite, and in fact, this is known as sexual parasitism. Sexual parasitism. That's right. Anglerfish are parasites of themselves. The males of some species, though, are fortunate enough to forego the fusing. They attach, take nutrients from the female, and release some sperm, then detach and go on their way. But the most famous one, just the female permanently has the male attached. Yeah. So there's that. And, it's interesting, certainly. This adaptation exists. That that was the best way for this to happen. Basically, and it makes sense because, as the book mentions, eggs take up far more room than sperm, so the male can afford to be comparatively tiny. And females must put a ton of energy into producing eggs. The lady anglerfish has such a giant mouth and stomach because she lives where there are so few things to eat, and therefore needs to be sure to tackle whatever comes her way to procure the energy. So you read about these things and at the start it'll be wow, that's very strange and gross, but then by the end of each little section, you will know more about these guys, these various creatures, including one of my favorites, the water bear, or tardigrade. And these guys are very, very small. They live in the mud. They are, they're pretty much everywhere. In the deepest depths of our oceans, where frigid temperatures and crushing pressure and scarce food combine to make for an unpleasant habitat. Also, in the hot springs of Yellowstone, I think, yeah, even the vacuum of space, you can find water bears there. How did water bears, this microscopic creature, end up in space? Well, in 2007, the European Space Agency launched a satellite with these very special passengers, 2 species of tardigrade. They kind of resemble bears, that's why they're called water bears. more like gummy bears. But basically, these microscopic invertebrates had already grown legendary for their resistance to heat and cold and radiation. So the scientists got the idea, why not fire them into space? And so they did. Once these water bears reached low Earth orbit, they were exposed to the vacuum for 10 days, then brought back home. Incredibly, they survived, like really well. Not one or two came back, like, just barely alive out of the specimens. No, I mean, most of them were fine. Their eggs even survived and hatched into healthy young. How this works is water bears can dehydrate down to 3% of their typical water content, folding in on themselves and entering what's known as cryptobiosis, essentially suspended animation. So this is neat. That's why they're almost indestructible, basically, is, their bodies can mobilize a sugar that replaces the lost water and protects their cells. They can stay like this for at least 30 years and still reanimate just fine. So that's pretty cool. Apparently, this process takes about an hour for reanimation of a water bear. Obviously, these things can be killed. They can be boiled. There's lots of things. But it's amazing that, there's almost nowhere that water bears can't exist. There's almost nowhere if, you were to test like mud or soil, you won't find them because they're just that resilient. Here's another little fact that I find interesting. The water bear's resistance to cold is pretty much unmatched. Scientists, they can't quite get to absolute zero even in a lab. Like the coldest it can possibly get, that's hard to replicate. But when in cryptobiosis, the water bear can survive temperatures down to 458 degrees Fahrenheit, a degree and a half away from absolute zero. That's even lower than the lowest temperature possible outside of a lab, about 455 degrees. Sorry, negative 455 degrees Fahrenheit. Both are bad. Neither of these you want to experience. But basically, negative 455 degrees, that's something you're only going to find out in space. So the water bear is capable of surviving temperatures no organism would ever experience in the known universe. But somehow they can. So that's pretty fascinating. And like on our moon, for example. On the moon, temperatures go from negative 280 to positive 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So, that's fine for water bears. And so is the radiation. That's okay too. So, yeah, it's amazing. Many of the creatures, like the water bear, I would say, in this book are not, scary or gross. The pink fairy armadillo. This is a creature that, lives in parts of the world, deserts that, are deemed lifeless, but they're not. They're definitely not. And basically, it's able to maintain body temperature in a way that almost no other creature can. But before I wrap up, I have to, of course, mention, the thing that the book gets its title from. And the problem with this, it's not a problem for you because you're not a caterpillar, but the difficulty with, oh boy, some of these are pretty gross. There's isopods that eat the tongues of fish, so that's not great. Ooh, giant African land snails. Those can chew through stucco, which is a problem in Florida. They have them in Florida, and these things will just eat people's houses. But so on the cover of this book, you find the Glyptopentales wasp. I think I'm saying that right. And what this creature does, the problem, all these sections start with a problem and a solution. So the problem for this type of wasp is that maggots are helpless. Wasps lay maggots, and okay, well, I'm a wasp. I'm busy. I have wasp things to do. So if a mother Glyptopentales wasp wants her eggs to be safe, what she does is she injects them into living caterpillars. After the larvae feed on the juices and burst out of their host, they mind control the poor beast to defend them as a bodyguard/babysitter. So there's that. It's quite, again, a fascinating adaptation that really works well for the wasp. And, it's good to know that basically as the book says, Wasp didn't suddenly arrive at the idea of assuming control over caterpillars. The same way the mustache toad, which is another great one, developed its weaponized mustache, over generation after generation, wasps with certain variations were more successful at reproducing. They may have begun, for instance, by injecting caterpillars in the first place and hollowing them out. That certainly helped. Indeed, there are any number of parasitic wasps that stop there, having for whatever reason not evolved further complexity. The other variations resulted in the larvae avoiding major organs, guaranteeing a fresh meal for longer. That too helped the young survive better, and therefore pass down the genes responsible for such variations. Small modifications accumulate over time to add up to an awesome event, like the mind controlling of a caterpillar. And, I mean, this is amazing, but again, it bears noting that evolution is a two-way street. So creatures can evolve this type of, adaptation, this onslaught of mind controlling something for its young, or having their young do it themselves, as they also eat this. But their victims can evolve a defense. And, then the book gets into the asp caterpillar, which is not a caterpillar that, can be consumed by wasps or controlled by wasp larvae in this way, because of these spines basically you think, oh, a caterpillar, well, that's just kind of a chubby meal for a lot of things, until it turns into something that can fly. It's kind of helpless. Not this thing. I mean, it has like these fibers that are almost like a tarantula's that can be very irritating and, can stop it from getting eaten. So good for it. But yeah, this is a very fascinating book. And again, it can be quite gross at times. Some of these creatures are, I'm just going to let you maybe see for yourself if you want to check out the, the isopod that really kind of freaks me out a little bit. The Suriname toad, that's a good one too. A lot of these, though, they're just really interesting. And, the pistol shrimp, tongue-eating isopod, it's actually called that. So that's a pretty, horrifying picture if you're looking for that. And, you're just going to learn a lot about weird evolutionary quirks and some really fascinating animals and bugs and fish and birds and all kinds of things. So check it out. And thank you for watching. I will see you again soon.